Hello, everybody, and welcome to Health Confidential with Simone Gisondi, the podcast where the secrets of the body meet the mysteries of healing. Each week, I explore the powerful world of holistic medicine, blending ancient wisdom and cutting edge science, conventional insight, and unconventional truths to decode some of the toughest cases and the most misunderstood conditions. I'm a certified holistic cancer therapies practitioner, a registered holistic nutritionist, and certified regenerative detoxification specialist. I am not a medical doctor. This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. The diagnosis and therapies discussed here may not be right for you. Please consult a qualified healthcare medical provider before making changes to your health. To learn more about my work or to experience the power of the custom-made healing protocols that I develop, designed specifically for your unique body, your unique biochemistry, your history, and your internal terrain, visit simonegisondi.com and book a private consultation with me. And if this episode speaks to you, follow me on Instagram at simone.gisondi and share this episode with someone you love. Thank you for listening, and welcome to today's episode of Health Confidential. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Health Confidential. I have one of the best guests you will have ever heard on my show today, especially because of the way that he positions health. So get ready to be enlightened. My guest today is Dr. Tom Cowan, who is a world-renowned medical director and researcher, and has been one of the leading voices that has been speaking out against the mainstream medical narrative and the coordinated agenda of masking, social distancing, and the forced vaccinations that we have all experienced in the past 4 years. In fact, Dr. Cowan challenges the conventional medicine to explore health and wellness in more holistic terms, seeking to provide a more collaborative forum for the exchange of knowledge, products, and practices that enable us all to forge a new world together, governed by truth. His website, by the way, you guys, if you want to just head over to his website, you will find a wealth of free content like podcasts, blogs, videos. And he also offers an amazing subscriber community of like-minded individuals that seek to survive and thrive in our rapidly changing world. He has also authored and co-authored 6 books. I will let you guys know which ones they are because they are so incredibly interesting. And the last one that we will be speaking about today is my favorite. So the first one, Human Heart, Cosmic Heart. And Dr. Cowan, you could let us know about all the books because I really want the audience to learn about all of your work. Cancer and the New Biology of Water, Vaccines, Autoimmunity, and the Changing Nature of Childhood Illness, for all of you parents out there. The Nourishing Tradition Book of Baby and Child Care, The Fourfold Path of Healing, Working with the Laws of Nutrition, Therapeutics, Movement, Meditation in the Art of Medicine, and my very favorite, The Contagion Myth, that you co-authored with the one and only Salon Fallon Morrill. Welcome to my show, Dr. Cowan.
Thank you. You can call me Tom. It's fine.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. So let's begin by speaking about the contagion myth. And I want to just let everybody know this book presents a very controversial view of viruses, which is what drew me to your work, especially because it's in relation to COVID-19. So it's what we have all experienced in the past 4 years. And in the book, you argue that viruses like coronavirus is actually not the true cause of disease, and you challenged a widely accepted germ theory. So I actually wanted to refer to a couple of the chapters that I am most excited by, and how these scientists actually describe what viruses are, and how you argue that they're actually exosomes and not viruses. If that's okay, we could start there.
Okay. I would say actually at this point, I would downplay the exosome thing, but we can get into that.
Okay, so why don't, for the audience, what would you say a virus is in layman's terms? Of course, you're a medical doctor, so you understand it from both the medical perspective as well as the more simplistic perspective. But for the average person that has not gone to medical school, what would you say a virus is?
A misconception. There's no such thing as a virus.
That's right. And a lot of people actually argue that during COVID, when they say, well, show us this virus. And of course, they brought out this I guess, computer generated image of a ball with spikes on it saying, this is it. This is it right here.
Yeah, what people have to realize is uh, there is a way of understanding whether something exists or not.
Mm-hmm.
And if you follow that understanding, that reasoning, you come to the conclusion very easily, by the way, that nobody has ever shown the existence of a virus. So, I mean, if you want, I can go over the steps of how we would do this. And then I think anybody who's listening will certainly have questions, if not be convinced. I mean, they should go and look at this. I'm not going to show papers here, so you'll have to sort of take my word for it that I'm accurate. But having read hundreds of virology papers, I can tell you, I know what I'm talking about how they do it. So if you want to do it like that, that's probably the simplest way.
Yes, please. And just for everybody to know, the book actually has some figures that you could see if you wanted to see anything image-wise. It's in the book. But yes, Dr. Cowan, please.
The other thing, the thing that's really got my attention lately is we actually live in a profoundly scientifically illiterate culture. And amongst the most profoundly scientific illiterates are the medical doctors and the scientists. And that to me is a problem, because then what we're dealing with is basically what I would call superstition. So let me just go over a few principles of what I mean by that. And we can play along here so you can see if you agree with me. One of the foundational principles of science and scientific thinking is that if you have a claim, in other words, a statement, and that statement cannot be falsified, then it's a belief. If it can be falsified, then you have to do the steps to falsify that claim. And here's the important point. You do not need to have an alternative explanation rather than falsifying that claim. So let me give you an example so everybody knows what I'm talking about. If you're an 18-year-old Asian-looking fellow and your parents are Caucasian, and then one day you rummage through your parents' closet and you find adoption papers, right? And you go to your parents and say, I didn't know I was adopted. I always wondered why I look different than you. What's the deal? And they say, yeah, well, we didn't want to tell you because, you get upset and all. But turns out, yes, you were adopted. We got you from an orphanage in China, et cetera. So you go to your best friend and say, man, I'm a little shook up because my parents just told me I was adopted. And he says to you, so who are your real parents? And you say, I don't know. I just found out today. And then he says, until you tell me who your real parents are, I don't believe you are adopted. Now, I can see from your response that you think that's ridiculous. So if I say nobody has ever shown that the existence of a virus, and then you come back and say, so what causes chickenpox? You have essentially asked me, so who are your real parents? There is a claim that chickenpox or measles or herpes or COVID is a specific disease entity, which by the way is also false, and that it's distinguishable from all other disease entities, which is by the way false. And the cause of it is an unseen particle called a virus. and that's false too. Now, the virology rests on 5 principles. The first is that sick animals or people, when they're in the same environment, like in the same room or same house or whatever, with well animals or people, make the well animals or people sick with the same disease. Now, interestingly, of all the principles of virology, this is the only one that common people have an experience of. I was around Aunt Bessie and she had a cold, and then I got a cold, and I sent my child to a chickenpox party and they got chickenpox, and then my friend had measles, and then I got measles, and on and on and on, right? Now, let me ask you a question. Do you agree that the principle behind that, behind those observations, right? Those are actual real observations, is if 2 or more people or animals get sick, same symptoms, same time, same place, that means something was passed from one to the other.
That's
Is
what
that
people
true?
believe. Well, having read your book, no.
All
But
right, so why not? Here's why not. Imagine you put 100 rats in a basement, and then you put rat poison, and then next day 10 rats bleed to death, next day 20, next day all the rest of the 70. And so same symptoms, same time, same place, clearly not contagious. They were all poisoned.
that's right.
My point is, you can't tell from that observation whether there was something in the environment or something that's communicated in some way, or that one animal made the other sick. You can't tell. So you have to do an experiment. You have to do an experiment that you control every variable, except you put like 100 people in one room. The environment's the same, the emotional content is the same, everything is the same. And then you put 10 people who have chickenpox in there, or smear chickenpox vesicle fluid on them, or cough or sneeze in them, or whatever. And the other, you do exact same thing, except they don't have chickenpox. And then you see if it's true that well people or animals make sick people or animals sick. Sorry, the other way around. Sick people make well people sick. Now, I can tell you that myself and 20 other researchers in this, including a book called Can You Catch a Cold, has looked at approximately 200 studies in the medical literature. Every single one of them has shown that sick people do not make well people sick. 100%. And we have not been able to find one that shows that if you put people with chickenpox with other people with chickenpox, whether they've had it or not, or measles or COVID or herpes or syphilis or any so-called communicable disease, that they make the well people sick. Now, if you disagree and insist that that's how you got sick, because it's obvious that you can't really tell, then you're going to have to send me a study that shows that that's how it works. And I can guarantee you won't find it, even though it's been studied for 150 years. So that's the first issue with virology, is the idea of contagion has been disproven, right? So that's the first one. The second one is the question, so how does a virologist show the existence of the virus and show that it causes disease? Now, that seems like a simple question, right? And in fact, I would encourage everybody listening to go to their family doctor and ask them tomorrow, can you tell me how a virologist shows that a virus exists and show that it causes disease? Now, these are supposedly highly trained medical practitioners who give you medicines to combat viruses. 99% of them will have no idea of the answer. Zero. So here's the first thing we have discovered. About 200 institutions around the world, CDC, NIH, Robert Koch Institute, Pasteur Institute, upon being asked in Freedom of Information, have you ever found a particle that you describe as a virus? Same size, protein coat, DNA or RNA interior, causes disease in the fluids of any sick person or animal, right? Like if you want to find a frog, you go to a pond and you take a net and you see if you have a frog. If you want to see if there's mosquitoes, you go outside where there's mosquitoes and you stick your arm out or whatever and see if there's mosquitoes. If it's a really small thing, you may use a microscope. In every one of those, they've said, we've never seen a thing we call a virus in the fluid of any sick animal or person. Not once. There is no published scientific paper that says I took the pus from chickenpox and I did something and I found these particles. They're all identical. They're called chickenpox virus. I isolated them, purified them, discovered what was in them, exposed them to another person, and they got chickenpox. That has never happened. Not once. And everybody agrees with that, which is bizarre, right? Because, like, what are they talking about here? Like, if somebody says that to you, have you ever seen a unicorn? No. So, but I know that the houses in the Ukraine are being blown up, and that's because of exploding flying unicorns. So did you see the unicorn at the site or, dead unicorns or anything? No. So you would be immediately suspicious that that may not be true, right? So that's the case. So then you say, well, how do you prove that the chickenpox lesion, the child with chickenpox or the child with measles, has a virus, right? There's got to be some way. So here's how they did it. They took the mucus from somebody with measles, right? They have snot and everything. And they take the mucus, they put it on a culture of specially bred monkey kidney cells called virocells. Then they add antibiotics that are specifically poisonous to kidney cells. Then they add trypsin and other chemicals, and then they add fetal bovine syrup. In other words, the fluid sucked out of the fetus of a newborn calf. They add that to the culture medium. They watch it for a few days. The cells die. And they say that is the isolation, the proof that there was a virus in the snot of the person with measles.
So, Dr. Cowan, why such a soup of all kinds of things for them to prove something? It just seems like they go to such lengths to put out a hoax.
Because they couldn't prove it otherwise. By the way, the original paper that did this, so this dying of the kidney cells, that is the proof. And I want everybody to really hear this. It's not a proof. It's not one of the proofs. It's the proof. Besides another one, West Nile virus, right? You've heard of that?
Of course, the mosquitoes.
Here's how they proved that it was a contagious particle called a virus. They took a woman in Uganda who had a fever of 100.6 and said she felt fine, right? They took some of her blood and injected it without looking for a virus, without doing anything to it, without purifying anything, injected it into the brain of a newborn mouse.
Okay.
The next day, the newborn mouse wasn't doing well, so they killed it, said there was inflammation in the brain of the newborn mouse, and that proved there was a virus, and they called it the West Nile virus. And the CDC refers to that paper as the first isolation, right? What does the word isolation means? separating one thing from all other things, right? I got a pen and a pencil. If I isolate the pencil, I just have a pencil, then I can study it. At which point did they actually isolate a virus? They took blood, injected it into the brain, and you could imagine if you inject anything into the brain of a newborn mouse, they may not do well. They didn't inject like healthy blood. They didn't inject saline. They didn't inject milk. They didn't inject just the virus because they never found it.
That's so
They
true.
injected blood from a sick person into a newborn mouse. And the title of the paper was Isolation of a New Virus they called the West Nile virus. Now, if you think that that's a scientific experiment, then you have a thought disorder. And that is how they isolate viruses. And if
I,
you haven't isolated it, you haven't shown that it exists, and you can't do a study with it. I can't find out if I grind these two together, I can't tell you if it has black ink, whether it came from this or this, right? It's obvious. So if you take somebody's, you don't even know that the thing has a genome, right? Because you don't have the thing. So if they take somebody's snot and look for gene segments in it, PCR test or antigen test or antibodies, they have no idea whether it's from you or the bacteria or the fungus or the mosquito that you just ate or the pollen that you breathed in. They have no idea because they've never separated those components. This is the essence of pseudoscience.
you literally just dismantled the entire idea of what they've been pushing on us for since the beginning of medicine.
Well, not the beginning of medicine. This is just since 1907.
Has
You know how
to.
it got started with polio? So they said they said all diseases caused by microorganisms that we can't see, right? That's a weird statement, but that's what they said. Then they looked with people with polio and they couldn't find any bacteria, no fungus, no bacteria in their brain. So they said, well, that's a problem because, we know that there must be something smaller than a bacteria. So they took a child who died from so-called polio, which just means they were paralyzed from God knows what,
Mhm.
and they ground up their spine where there supposedly was sick. They injected that without filtering it into many different animals. None of them got sick. Then they injected it into two rhesus monkey brains, right in their brain. One rhesus monkey died and the other got paralyzed. They said that proves polio is a transmissible disease caused by something smaller than a bacteria. Now, again, if
Wow.
you think that's a scientific experiment that shows that polio is a transmissible disease caused by an agent smaller than a bacteria, you have a thought problem because that's nonsense. Like you would at least inject the healthy brain, ground up spine of a child or a person who wasn't sick, right? At least that, but they didn't even do that. How do they know that just injecting ground up diseased spine from somebody who died from God knows what right into the brain of a little monkey doesn't cause trouble? It does.
Wouldn't the monkey's brain or the monkey's body, the organism, try to detoxify itself, thereby showing that it's what we call sick? Typically, that's how the body kind of shows a symptom that we attribute to, oh, that's the sickness, that's the illness, that's the disease.
Right. I mean, that gets complicated, but with COVID, they took snot from people who had allegedly COVID, which has no definition, except there is a definition of COVID, which means see, right? The words like see meaning look,
Hmm.
see the ovid. You know what an ovid is?
Tell us.
A sheep.
Oh,
Very clever. See the ovid, see the sheep,
That
do
is,
what you're told. So they took the see the sheep people who had snot, and they didn't purify it, didn't find any, didn't look for a virus, anesthetize ferrets, put a tube down into their lungs, put the goop from the sick people into their lungs, and then found out if they had a cough.
this sounds like if you've ever
And
seen the
then
movie, The
and
Doctor.
then they said we looked for these gene segments in the snot, right, of the original person. And lo and behold, we found the same gene segments in the lungs of the ferret, which means that the virus grew in the lungs. Or if you put something in somebody's lungs and then you look for it the next day, it's possible you
That
may
you'll
find it.
find it.
If you put a piece of chalk or a grapefruit piece or a monkey brain or something into a lung of a ferret, A, they may cough. B, you may find the piece of the monkey brain. And that's proved that COVID is a transmissible disease caused by a virus. Now, I don't expect anybody to believe me, because the question everybody is asking now is, wait a minute. Are you saying these people are that stupid that they do stuff like this and they expect us to believe it? The answer is yes. And so you have to, that's what you're going through. It cannot be what this guy is saying. Like, this is so obvious that it's frank bullshit that nobody would believe it. Nobody who's been to school for 20 years or whatever would believe such a thing, but they do. And all their apologists in the health freedom community, I could name off all, they believe it too. It's disgusting. And go look it up yourself. And by the way, then send me a study showing where they isolated any virus, and I'll tell you why it's nonsense.
Okay, so let's talk about one particular thing that I get a lot of questions from women in particular, and that is the cervical cancer that is caused by HPV, so the human papilloma virus.
There is
So,
no HPV.
well, I mean, if you do research online, you will see that they have 12 high risk HPV types. So they
Yes.
have given them numbers 16, 18, 39, 58, 59. And apparently only some of these are responsible for causing cervical cancer. And
It's
women
all
say,
make believe.
so women say that they do their pap smears and these cells that are collected during this procedure come out as abnormal. So they call that cervical dysplasia, and then it turns into cancer down the road. How would you be able to? Because I've tried to explain to women that even the moment when they collect these, perhaps the body is shedding the skin on that particular tissue as it does with our skin, our outer skin. And perhaps they're catching it at that time when the body is just shedding it. And of course, it's probably not in its normal state, which is why the body's getting rid of it. And they say, oh, you have abnormal cells. And then they scare people into believing these are precancerous, because that's what they call it. And they scare people, or women rather, into believing that they're going towards cervical cancer, which kills people, and that they should get the Gardasil vaccine to prevent this from happening.
So the first thing is, if you believe there is such a thing as HPV, you're going to have to send me a study where they isolated HPV from any person, animal, or any organism, which has never been done, show that it has many different types, which has never been done. And then because they've never isolated it and purified it, it obviously has never been studied. So there's no way to know that it has anything like proteins or types or anything. So the whole thing is, you see what happens in science, and this actually started really in earnest with a guy named Albert Einstein. I'm sure you've heard of him. He's one of the biggest frauds ever. So he said that science should no longer be based on observation and experimentation. It should be based on free inventions of the mind.
Oh.
In other words, making stuff up.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with making stuff up is everything that we limited people, human beings, make up eventually gets shown to be wrong. At which point, then you have an option. You can make up another story to keep it going, or you can say, well, the first thing was wrong, so let's junk that. So here's how this played out in virology. So they said everybody who has an illness caused by a virus would get sick, right? If you're around somebody with the flu, that's caused by a virus, you get sick. So then they looked out in the real world, like experimentation and observation, and not everybody got sick, right? Obviously, you get people around chickenpox. Some people get sick, some people don't. Measles, same thing. Cervical dysplasia, same thing. Some people get sick, some people don't. So you falsified that claim. So then to keep the story going, they say, well, that's because some people are immune to the virus. And so if you have immunity, meaning antibodies to the virus, then you don't get sick. So originally then, so that's another story to keep the original story going. So then they said, if you get measles, you make antibodies, and then you're protected. You never get measles again, right? You've heard that. You get HPV, you get antibodies, then you don't get it again. And then you get chickenpox and you make antibodies and you don't get it again, except sometimes you get it again. That's called shingles. But never mind, that's because the virus evaded your immune system. But then you get the flu virus and then you get antibodies, but then you get the flu again the next year. So that's because the flu virus is very smart and it evaded the antibodies so that then it makes you sick every year. And then you get HIV, that causes AIDS. And now we know for sure that if you have antibodies to HIV, that means the virus is going to kill you. And I remember when I first heard that, when I graduated from medical school, I said, wait a minute. They told me if I have antibodies like to measles virus, I'm immune for life. And now this guy, Gallo, he just told me if I have antibodies to HIV, the virus is going to kill me. And without any explanation as to, I said to my friend, wait a minute, they just changed the rules. The whole immunology, they just threw out the window. So the whole thing is nonsense. And then they find out that the antibodies, of course, don't do that. So then it's the subset, the epitope of the antibodies, and it keeps the story going. And now, so there is no HPV. So here's cancer. Here's why the whole thing is nonsense. And this gets into the real psyop in medicine. Now, this is the real thing they've got people convinced that's not true, is that there are these distinct things called diseases, and then you have one of them, and that's why you're sick. The reality is you get poisoned or starved or traumatized or you're fearful or something happens to you, and then your body does something to try to heal you that causes symptoms, and then that's what we call being sick. So the sick part is the therapy for being poisoned or starved or something. Now, how do I know that? Imagine you get a splinter in your finger, right? You don't take it out. What happens next?
It's going to get inflamed and you're going to probably get pus.
Yeah. So they go to medical school, they say the pus infection, you have to get rid of the pus. But it's obvious the pus is the therapy for the splinter, right?
The body's producing that to be able to eliminate it. Yep, exactly.
Okay. Then you breathe in toxic debris like chemtrails and all that stuff. So you get it in your lungs. What happens next? Same with the splinter. You try to get it out. That's called a cough and mucus and all that stuff, fever to get liquefy the mucus. You go to the doctor. He says you have bronchitis. What you have is an attempt to get rid of the splinter, the debris you put in your lungs, right? It's obvious. Now, here's a question for you. You probably have a house, right?
Mm-hmm.
Imagine somebody puts stinky garbage in the foyer of your house, right? What are you going to do next?
You're going to try to, if it's on the floor, you try to bag it up so that you could take it out to the trash can.
Right. First you bag it, then you take it to the garage, then you take it to the curb.
That's right.
Right? So somebody puts poison in your body, like glyphosate, bad food, toxic emotions, you're having sex with the wrong person, could be a lot of things. So you're putting garbage in your house. What do? You put it in a bag. That's called a tumor.
That's what the body does.
And so we think that the tumor is the disease. It's the way to get rid of garbage. Now, here's how I knew this. So let's say that didn't work and the person keeps putting garbage in your house, right? So then you get more and more bags and your garage is full. So you put it in a spare bedroom and then you put it in this your kitchen, living room, master bedroom, and then you have to move because your house is full of garbage. So that's what happens to people. They get some garbage like vaccines and pharmaceuticals and glyphosate and bad food. They put it in bags and then they put it in the next place and they call that metastases.
That's right.
And they say it swam through the blood from the cervix to the liver. So I asked the oncologist, can you show it to me in the blood, right? Because you said it swam from the blood, from the cervix or the breast to the liver. No. Why not? You just told me it swims through the blood. No, you can't see it in the blood. Why not? Well, it's not enough of it to see. So how do you know it went through the blood? Well, because otherwise, how did it get from the cervix to the liver? How did your garbage get from the foyer to the garage? It must have walked. You see, this is nonsense. And that's why if first of all, so then when you have garbage, your tissue breaks down into all these different kinds of debris, and some of them are worse than others, and those are what they call viruses. They're just you're just tissue breaking down. They put it in an electron microscope. They show you an image. You get the same image if you put formaldehyde or some other chemical in your cervix and broke it down that way. You'd get the exact same image. This was proven over and over again. And if anybody doesn't believe me, I have what I call my pumpkin challenge test. So I have this cat named Pumpkin, and I got him when he was young. So I taught him to say yes or no. He used his right paw to say yes, his left to say no. So he likes virology. So I showed him 5 pictures of SARS-CoV-2 and 5 pictures of broken down kidney cells, monkey kidney cells, and said, Pumpkin, which one is which? And he got 6 out of the 10 right, which is better than any virologist has done.
60%, yes.
And so if you show people pictures of the quote viruses coming from your cervix next to just debris from breaking down cervix with no virus in it, they are identical, and you can prove that by showing them pictures, and they won't be able to beat Pumpkin as far as knowing which one is which.
To add to that and to make you laugh, so apparently HPV is a sexually transmitted disease, so it's an STD, so a man is supposedly passing it on. I'd like to take a quick break now to let you know that today's show is sponsored by my book, Against Medical Advice. This book is a memoir and it tells the story of how I built my life back after suffering a stroke during my divorce. I discuss the nutritional, lifestyle, and mindset aspects that I put into practice to regain my health and rebuild my life. The book has been a labor of love, both writing it and publishing it, and I couldn't be more proud of it. Please pick up your copy from Amazon. For your very own signed copy, my email address is simone@simonegisondi.com. Oh, and I'd really appreciate it if you'd please consider leaving a review once you've read the book. And now, back to the show. Passing it on to a woman, but somehow, magically, you cannot detect it in a man if you test them.
Right.
You're only detecting it in women.
That's it.
So the men passed something on that they cannot find, but they can find it in women. I'm like,
right.
Make it make sense.
Yeah, no, this is not about making sense. And even the whole thing with sexually transmitted diseases, there was a big study of syphilis because prostitutes get syphilis, right? That means they get, so just to be clear, I'm not saying people don't get cervical cancer. I'm not saying it may not kill them. I'm not saying that people don't get lesions on their genitals, which we call syphilis. What I'm saying is, if you want to prove that it's caused by a bacteria, and it's transmissible between people, the way you have to do that is isolate the bacteria, which you can do with bacteria, and put those in a woman in their vagina in the way that that would happen, not semen, not anything else, and show that it causes disease. When they've done that, it doesn't work. But here's what is very interesting. So they get these women and they'll have a lesion on their genitals for whatever reason. Now, the treatment was give them mercury. Now, interestingly, mercury causes genital lesions, like it's a very strong poison. So they would have a lesion, give them mercury, then they would get more lesions, and then the mercury actually concentrates in the vaginal secretions. So the man would have intercourse with the woman and be exposed to the mercury, and then he would get lesions on his genitals. And he say, see, that's sexually transmitted, whereas actually is completely reproducible by mercury exposure. And then he has sex with the next prostitute who then gets exposed to that. And then the mercury causes lesions on their genitals. They go and get treated for mercury, for syphilis with mercury, and the whole thing goes on. And the fascinating thing about this is then they have this bizarre thing called, they say that the syphilis goes underground, the bacteria hide, but then they cause tertiary syphilis, which is neurological problems and paralysis and heart problems and a bunch of other things. And that comes later. Now, those are the exact same symptoms of gas mercury poisoning. So they poison them with mercury over and over again because they're prostitutes. And then they get deterioration of their brain and their aorta and a whole bunch of other things, all classic mercury poisoning. And they say that's the bacteria causing tertiary syphilis. It's a crock.
So I have to ask, how did the first person did they believe it? I'm trying to go as far back as I can. Did the initial person who brought up these ludicrous ideas actually believe them to be truth and fact? And then they managed to convince supposedly highly intelligent people that this is even possible?
Well, the first one, I mean, not the first one, but the first modern one was Louis Pasteur. And he worked with anthrax. And so he had, bacteria are real, not like viruses. So you can have a culture of pure anthrax, and he exposed animals to it, and they didn't get sick. And he was convinced that they would. So he did something which was very clever. He essentially grew the anthrax in a solution containing arsenic. And then he gave those, he called it enhanced anthrax with arsenic. And then he gave the enhanced anthrax to the people, to the animals, and they got anthrax. They got sick. And he said, see, I proved anthrax is a transmissible bacteria. He never did just the arsenic itself, because that would blow the whole thing. And so he essentially started this. Did he believe it? I mean, on his deathbed, he said it's all bullshit.
He did.
The other guy who did was a guy named Robert Koch, and he did similar things. He made Koch's postulates, which are actually sensible. You have to have the thing, you have to isolate it, you have to show that that isolated bacteria or fungus causes the same symptoms, and then you have to isolate it from the person you made sick. And then he said, I never was able to prove the postulates, but I believe them anyways. And so he did the same thing with TB. He would soak it in arsenic or mercury. He would spray that on people, and then they would get TB or sick, and then he would claim it was from the bacteria. So did they believe it? I mean, I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's really easy to, especially when you're talking about things that are microscopic, it's so easy to fool people.
No kidding.
It's very easy because
Yeah,
you don't have to
because
come up with anything to show them to the naked eye to say, here, this is what it is.
right, because the first thing that we people do, if you tell me there's a unicorn and I say, how big is it? Well, it's just like a horse, And I say, well, show me where the unicorn is. And you say, well, you can't see it. It's invisible. So how do you know it's there? I can tell you, I know why there's unicorns, because the unicorns blow up houses, and I spread unicorn repellent around my house, and it's never once been blown up. And that proves that A, there's unicorns, and B, that unicorn repellent stops unicorns from blowing up my house.
I love your unicorn idea. This is the
That's
funniest
how
thing
they
I've ever.
think. Yeah, but you give the measles shot. Does anybody ask your doctor, how do they make a measles shot? He has no idea. They take snot from somebody with measles, they put it on the culture, they put antibiotics, they put trypsin, they put fetal serum, the culture dies, they put it in a vial, and that's a viral vaccine. And then they inject it, and then you get sick. And then they say, you see, the virus made you sick. And then it made antibodies, which then protect you, except if you have HIV, then it makes you sick. Or the flu, then it only partially protects you. The whole thing is just pure nonsense.
It is the best theatrical production of that mankind has ever thought, if ever.
It's not the best, but it's up there.
I don't know. I mean, because like, look what they just did in 2020. They were able to pull something off where people like voluntarily imprisoned themselves and
Well,
muzzled
they're
themselves.
doing it again with Eastern equine encephalitis. in Massachusetts, and Vermont has canceled Oktoberfest because one person got neurological symptoms allegedly from Eastern equine encephalitis virus. So this is not over.
And this somehow got transmitted to
Monkeypox.
humans. Oh, yeah, and Mpox, of course. Let's not forget that.
Here's the funny thing about monkeypox. The same isolate, how they isolate, they took somebody who they said had skin lesions. They scraped the skin lesions, put it in a culture. The culture broke down. They said we isolated monkeypox. Then they showed electron microscope pictures, and they were rectangular, right? The kidney cells broke down into little rectangles. And they said monkeypox virus is a very distinct virus because it's rectangular in shape, right? So that's how we know it's a different virus than all the other ones. So now we fast forward, that was in the 50s or so. Now like 70 years later, they show you pictures of monkeypox virus, and it's round. And I asked one of, wait a minute. You told me that the reason we knew it was monkeypox virus was because it was a rectangle. How come this one's round? Like, what? Well, it mutated.
I
So
was
that
just going to ask if that was the answer.
so
They say that about
that's
the
the
flu.
cover story. You always have to make up a new story, you know. So they make up a new story. The virus mutated, and now it's different. So how come it's the same virus then? Well, it's the same virus, but it's a different version of the same virus. And by the way, if you don't catch it early, it'll mutate again and it'll escape, and then the whole world will have monkeypox. Oh man, it's great stuff.
You must have such a good laugh, especially because you went to med school and you were able to study some of the stuff that, of course, the average person doesn't understand to the degree that you do and hasn't had the
It's not
ability to
that
study it.
hard.
But it's
It's
just the way you describe it is, it's so funny. Um,
Yeah, it's like a comedy show.
it is
It's
like a
not
comedy
funny
show.
though. I mean, they actually hurt people.
They
So
do. And it begs the question, how do they, this is so, I'm just back to the question I asked you in the beginning. Do these people believe it? Because I speak even with friends and I say, do people that give even chemotherapy or whatever kind of therapy to people, do they truly believe in it, that it works and they do it from a place of, I want to help you? Or do they know it doesn't help because some doctor said, oh, I would never give chemo to my wife. I would
yeah,
never
it's
give chemo
both.
to my family.
I mean, at the end of the day, I've decided there's three reasons people believe in viruses. One of three. The first is they could care less. Like, for instance, I don't know anything about carburetors of cars. Frankly, I don't even know if cars have carburetors. And so I can tell you though, I don't go around giving lectures about carburetors because somebody might say, Tom, they don't even make carburetors anymore. And frankly, if somebody said, well, why don't you go to a lecture on carburetors? I won't go because I frankly could care less if there's carburetors or not. So that's a legitimate reason. Some people just don't care. But I would only say if you don't care, fine. But don't go around telling people like they should imprison themselves or inject themselves with poison because they don't know about carburetors, for God's sake. I mean, just say you don't know and I don't have an opinion about this. So that's the first reason. The second reason is they're just ignorant. Like most medical doctors, if you say, well, tell me, how do they find a virus? Well, they do a PCR test. What do you mean? In order to do a PCR test, you have to show that the piece of it came from a virus. And if so, you have to show the virus. If you tell me that this piece of a hoof came from a unicorn, I want to see the unicorn and that the hoof came from the unicorn. You can't say, well, it, it must have because I don't know where else it came from. I mean, that's ridiculous. So most of the scientists are like that. They're just ignorant. And then there's a very small percentage of people who I would say have nefarious interests. So they know this is all bullshit, but it works for them, so they're going to do it.
Well,
Now,
Dr. Fauci went door to door. I think it was in New York, and he was trying to tell people to vaccinate themselves because they're going to die otherwise.
yeah, I mean, so I try not to speculate of which people are in which category, it's two or three, because until they tell me, yeah, I'm saying this because I want to kill people. Like I don't want to ascribe motives to people. Uh, all I know is whenever I ask, and what's so disheartening about this is the vast majority of the so-called health freedom community buys it lock, stock, and barrel. I'm talking, Kennedy and Mercola and Kirsch and Malone and all the rest of them. They buy it locks. And if you ask them, which I have, how do you know there's a virus? No idea. Well, because you're not interested, like me in carburetors? No, of course I'm, it's like, so they don't want to know. So they have plausible deniability. In other words, you can't accuse them of, well, everybody thinks that, and that's, I don't know, but all the scientists, they agree. So what do they do? Because I try not to believe stuff that I don't know how they came up with that. Like carburetors. I
Like
don't know how
carburetors.
you come up with a carburetor or not, and I don't care, and so I don't have an opinion about it.
So if individuals wanted to protect themselves, and let's say they they buy what you're saying, because I know a lot of I try to teach people, and especially but when it comes to the HPV, I said, how can you get something if a man if they cannot detect it in a man, how can you get it from that man? How can they find it in you but not in him? So how can people protect themselves if viral transmission isn't the cause of illness?
Well, what's amazing is having talked to, I don't know, thousands or hundreds and thousands of people. The people who really get this, not because Tom said or Mark Bailey or Andy Kaufman, or there's a lot of people now, but they get it. They understand the simple thinking. Like, in order to show that something exists, you have to go to the place you find it, like a frog. You go to a pond, you get a net, you find the frog. Then you can study the frog and see if it catches flies. If you can't do that, there's a problem. And that's never been done. Everybody agrees. Once you get that and you lose the fear of contagion, right? That sick people, or that outside things are making you sick, inevitably then you have to ask, well, what am I doing that's making me not well? Now, it could be how you eat, your relationships, your emotions, the way you think. That's most people. They're living around, walking around in a make-believe world. The guy named William Casey, head of the CIA, said 1980 or so, when our disinformation campaign is complete, everything, and that, notice the word, everything the American public believes will be false.
Wow.
Not some things. Like, so if you believe something like viruses make you sick, or you get sick from Uncle Harry, or, then you will manifest that. And you're living in a make-believe superstitious world. If you believe the government exists and can take your property away, then they will become manifest and they will take your property away.
Or make you pay
So
taxes.
you have to straighten out how you think. In other words, become less illiterate. And that's hard for most people, but that's what you got to do.
It's difficult, especially if, let's say, the average person is 45 years old. And for 45 years, having gone through the schooling system that convinces you and brainwashes you into a specific way of living, and that society is set up in a certain way. Can you imagine having to unlearn 45 years worth
Yeah,
of
it's hard.
information?
But you're exactly right. In fact, I have a new book coming out about school and child rearing.
Oh,
School
perfect.
is a key player in this, because the agenda of school is to teach you lies. Period. That's the
And
agenda.
to
And they're
make
good
you,
at it. So
yeah,
when
and
people say the school system's failing, no, it's not. It's that's what it was set up to do, and they got it down to an art form.
they've been doing it for some time
They've been doing it for a while.
to turn people into exactly what they want them to be. And we see the new agenda right now and in which direction
COVID,
it's going.
see the sheep.
See the yes, yes.
They always have to tell you hide it in plain sight.
That's the thing. It's almost even what you've been saying about viruses. It's that saying, it's almost too good to be true. So it sounds so simple in the way you describe it that it's difficult to even to say like, there's no way. There's no way. It sounds too simple.
Yeah, this guy must be a nutcase. And fine, you can say I'm a nutcase, but next step is you got to show me the study where they isolated the virus. Because I tell you that the world that I'm talking about is a much freer, healthier, happier. Uh, we are in control. We, with our choices, how we live, how we farm, how we garden, who we have sex with, who we relate to, how we make a living, it's up to us. So we have control. They don't have squat. All they have is superstitions and fear. And that's a good thing, because once you stop believing in imaginary unicorns blowing up buildings in the Ukraine, then they go away.
So I saw in I believe it's in chapter 5 or 6. So you break down, I guess, reasons that people get sick as starvation, which I usually call nutritional deficiencies, so that the body doesn't get the raw materials that it uses to build tissues and be able to even chemicals that like hormones and enzymes. Then chemical poisoning. So let's say that that is
Now,
chemtrails
I've
that we
come to
inhale.
believe that there may not be hormones in living people.
Really? Tell us
And
about that.
if I ask you, so you think there's testosterone in men, right?
Yes, that's what we've been led to believe.
And estrogen in women.
Yes.
Okay, how did they find testosterone in men?
I'm assuming that they probably
Well,
break
what do you mean
down.
you're assuming? If you
Yes,
think it's there, you have to know how they found it.
I'm assuming again that the medical industry has gone in and taken, let's say, fluids from a man and said, "Hey, this is testosterone and it's at this level in men at this age."
Yeah, but what did they do to say there was testosterone? That's the question.
So
Of
let's
course,
say
they
they
say it.
they extract something from a man's testicles, which is where it's supposedly produced, and then they present that to the public as here is
Yeah, but
testosterone.
what you mean they just present like a ground up testicle and say, see, there's testosterone in there.
Let's say fluid.
Okay, there's fluid. See, it's oozing. You can see it running down my arm. That's testosterone, because I can see it running down my arm. No, how did they find testosterone in that fluid?
Or progesterone
Or insulin?
or insulin for that matter. Yes. Vitamin D, as they call it, which is a hormone.
Any of it. How did they do it? See, you don't know.
No, of course not.
Right, I do. Because I looked. I thought, all right, how did the first guy isolate testosterone from a testicle? And I found that he took the testicle, he ground it up, he filtered it, he mixed it with an acid, then he mixed it with a base, and then he dehydrated it, and then he mixed it with acetone 6 times. Because if he did it 5 times, he didn't get anything. So he did it 6 times, and then he got a precipitate, and then he mixed it with distilled water, and he did a chemical assay, and he said, this is a new chemical that nobody else found, probably because nobody else extracted it 6 times with acetone, and it's called testosterone. That's how he found it. And he didn't, and I've asked analytical chemists, well, how do you know that none of those steps, there's like 8 steps, acids, alkali, filter it, dehydrate, how do you know they didn't make something appear that wasn't there in the actual person? You know what the answer is?
Hmm.
They have no idea. So how do you know that there isn't just like something, I don't know what, and if you say, well, what is it? That's like asking me who's your real parents. I don't know. I just know that the way you found it is scientific nonsense. Therefore, you can't say it's actually there. Same with estrogen, same with insulin, same with vitamin D. These are superstitions that were actually made of chemicals. Like, you can't even prove that, because in order to find them, you have to do stuff to it which you can't control, which means you can't say that we're not made of chemicals, but you can say that we haven't been able to prove that we are. Because it's when you try to do an actual scientific experiment with controls and you can't find it except if you do certain things, and you don't know if those things made that appear, you're talking pseudoscience.
So it's because we believe that that's the case is the case, but it could just not be the case just as much as we believe it is the case.
Well, right. I'm not saying that giving somebody testicles don't do anything, right? I'm specifically saying when you go to prove that an ovary has estrogen, and you do it in a way that every step of the way, like they do with analytical chemistry, they control every step so that they make sure that that step didn't make that thing appear. Because that's what happens. If you take something and mix it with an acid, you get something new that wasn't there in the original sample, obviously, right? So you've got to figure out a way to find it without doing the acid thing, but then it doesn't work. In other words, you cannot claim that you can find it, because every technique that we've designed to use essentially can't be controlled. The best then is to say we're basically some energy field that somehow looks like it's physical, and God knows how that happens.
So
That's where we're
then
at.
they are saying that now men's testosterone levels are significantly lower than they were, let's say, 40 to 50 years ago. Do they use the same 8-step process you just described that they initially used?
Once they do the 8-step process, then they have this chemical, and then they they essentially have that embedded into their analytical tools to find it and say the level's lower. Yes. So, now that doesn't mean that there isn't a problem. It doesn't mean there isn't something different about men nowadays testicles than it was 100 years ago. That's different. Those things you can actually observe, unlike what Einstein said. Instead of making stuff up, you can observe that people have less muscle tone, etc. So those are observations. That's real science, or how we know things. But these chemical, the idea that we're made of these hypothetical molecules. I mean, when you even get into, how they prove that even atoms exist? Everybody believes in atoms, right? They become molecules that become chemicals like testosterone. They have disproven that there's even such a thing as an electron. Disproven. And Schrodinger says clearly, if you looked into an atom, you'd never see an electron. We made it up.
Wow.
So this all goes back to atomistic theory. It goes back to reductionism, that in order to know something, you have to break it into its parts. That's a theory. It's not true. That water is not made of H2O. It's not made of anything. It's just water.
So there's
And
no hydrogen in it, no
no
oxygen.
hydrogen. You have to mess with it to make the hydrogen be produced.
Wow.
So
So
this all comes from a reductionist, materialistic mindset that the world is made out of billiard balls called atoms. And no physicist believes that. They all think it's nonsense. These are probability, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, that you can't see the location and the speed of an electron. Right. But they can tell you the speed of how fast your car is going and where it is. Like cops do that all the time. But somehow with an electron, you can't do it. Why? It's too small. I mean,
But they're able to see viruses.
yeah, right.
So if all of this has been disproven and is really, you just have to believe it because they tell you, or you could say, no, it's not true because you can't prove it. What is true? And what do we attribute the very aspects of our humanness as, or even like, let's say, men and women that make a man and a woman, if not the levels of various hormones or chemicals that give us those female male attributes that contribute to the procreation and the development of a child of a specific gender.
So here's some, I don't like to give advice to people, but if you want some advice, stick with disproving things. And just when you come to a question like this, just say, I don't know, you got me. All I know is there are men and there are women. And when they come together in a certain way, they make a child. And there's clear differences that I can see. They're not difficult to figure out who's who. And I don't know what created that or how that came about, but there's no way that I'm going to just jump to, well, it's because of certain chemicals found in them. So we don't know, how a living being comes about. I'm sure it's complicated, mysterious, and there's all kinds of factors in there. So I'm not going to go speculating because then somebody's going to prove me wrong. And I don't have the experimental observation or the evidence. All I know is there's men and there's women. There's a clear difference, and I can tell you who's who.
Chromosomes, XY, XX.
It's chromosomes are a misconception. We don't have time to get into that.
No, we don't. But okay, I just thought that maybe you would think that that's what makes us different, because I know that there was
No,
a lot of
it is not.
debate over what is a woman, and nobody could actually identify any specific thing that makes a woman a woman.
Everybody can identify.
But
We've been
they've been saying, it's like it's a difference of were you born XX or XY.
No, that's not it.
That's not it. And of course, there's the essence of women. And I know that in the more spiritual circles, they talk about how even when women go through menopause, it sort of sunsets certain physical aspects and physiological things that women usually experience, and then other things sort of come into play and are more accentuated and augmented, like a woman's intuition. So we move away from certain chakras that kind of sunset, and then we move up those chakras, and then the third eye and intuition become way more augmented, and that's why women are wiser as they get older.
Right, but they don't suddenly grow a penis.
Certainly not.
Right. So that's why they're still a woman. And yes, all these transformations, and that's great things to try to study and understand. And you can actually use real thinking and real science and simply observe what happens without making explanations that only serve to bamboozle you and throw you off course. That's what I'm talking about. Just stick with what you can see and what is clear, and then you can try to experiment with it and see, if I eat only bananas, what happens during menopause? If I eat Nourishing Traditions diet, what happens during menopause? So then you'll know, here's some factors that play into how this course goes. If I meditate, if I walk, if I expose my body to the sunlight, if I walk on the earth, if I walk in the garden, if I swim in the ocean, what happens to my insight after menopause? Those are the real questions, not, what happens to your telomeres and your DNA, which supposedly is in the chromosomes, which it isn't, which that's a whole myth too. But the whole thing. So stick with what you can actually observe and experiment with. That's the magic of this learning process. And they have convinced us to make everything abstract and incorrect. And people believe in all these theories, and yet they don't even know where the theory came from. They don't know whether it's how to prove it, how to show it's true. They just believe in viruses. They believe in HPV. They don't know how you would know that's true or not. That's where you get into trouble. Stick with what you can see, what you can experience, what you can observe. The real world around you, your life will be a lot better.
Yes, and of course, a lot of us have been taught to find an answer or look for an answer, or that there are answers like written in stone. And then, of course, science changes and we evolve and things change across the continuum of life. But there's never anything that we could say, because even if you look at the idea of diets, I mean, fat free and carnivore, keto, Mediterranean, and so on and so forth, and we never arrive at anything that truly works. So I
It's
think that,
because we analyze it based on the chemicals in food.
yes,
And if you do that, you always come out wrong.
yes.
It's the
Yeah,
wrong way. It's the wrong method. We have a reductionist materialistic theory which has been disproven. And so if you're using a disproven theory to decide what you eat, instead of, when I eat this, how do I feel? That's a experimental, observational, scientific approach. What happens to me when I eat this way?
that's actually important to emphasize what happens to me, because a lot of people ask, well, what happens to you when you eat this way? So they expect that what happens to that person has to happen to themselves,
Right.
and that if they had a good experience with it, so will they, or if they had a bad experience, they should stay away from it. So I appreciate that so much, because I think it's so important that we don't look outside of ourselves or at external factors to give us answers that would be true for us, because then we try to force that into being a truth for us. And
Yes.
going back to the example that I gave you, I have heard atrocious things that women have been put through as these doctors chase the cervical cancer or the
Yeah.
dysplasia and what it has its roots
Barbaric.
in. Very barbaric, very barbaric.
All right.
Well, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate you sharing the wisdom. For the audience, I promise you that this is going to be one of the most interesting and fascinating conversations. Of course, you're going to all walk away from this show wondering whether anything your doctor tells you is true or not. So, the way that he described, ask the hard questions, put them on the spot to give you the answers. Of course, make sure to visit me on Instagram at Simone Gisondi. And of course, please tell us where they could find you. I know I follow you on Instagram and you have so much wisdom in there, but I would like for the audience to know where they could find you and take advantage of the amazing wisdom that you shared with us today in more
It's
detail.
mostly drtomcowan.com and New Biology Clinic. We have an online clinic of doctors who think more or less like I do.
Mhm.
So we have an online clinic to help people regain their health. So that's newbiologyclinic.com.
Newbiologyclinic.com, drtomcowan.com. And of course, you will find all of his socials linked there. Thank you so much. And if you found value in this show, I would appreciate a rating on YouTube, iTunes. And if you want to tell a friend about the show, that would help us too. Thank you so much, Dr. Cowan. I appreciate all your wisdom, and hopefully I can have you back so we could talk about some of the other things so that I can laugh again like I did today.
Oh, good. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much for joining me on Health Confidential, where healing is more than just symptom relief. It's a return to the body's original blueprint, guided by truth, intuition, and cellular intelligence. If today's episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And follow me on Instagram at simone.gisondi for daily insights, behind the scenes wisdom, and holistic inspiration. To explore working with me and to get your own custom made healing protocol, visit simonegisondi.com and book your private consultation to start working together. Remember, your body is sacred, your intuition is gold, and healing is your birthright. I'm Simone Gisondi, and this has been Health Confidential. See you in the next episode.